The thing about your movie is it's grounded in truth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that is, this was 3 years ago that I had a note from an executive on a script that I wrote that I needed to make a character blacker. This is, this wasn't 40 years ago. This is 3 years ago. So yeah, this is taken, a lot of it's taken directly from my personal experience, having worked in entertainment, but also I was a journalist for 8 years. Same thing was happening in journalism too.
But you got onto this film very quickly. You read the book, I think, in December 2020.
Yes.
And within 3 months, you were writing the screenplay for it.
Yeah. I had found the book through happenstance in December of 2020, fell in love with it as soon as I read it, and I went out to Percival Everett, the author, it's called Erasure, and asked him for the rights, and he could tell how passionate I was, and very fortunately he gave me the rights for free for 6 months, and he said, just go write a script, and if you can write a script and something comes of it, then you can pay me at that point. And so I'll be forever indebted to him that we weren't tied up in sort of like legal issues trying to close that deal before I could write.
And to be delicate here, didn't this film have another title?
Yeah, I mean, we do. I mean, I'll be indelicate. The other title was called Fuck.
I'm so British.
But I promise there's a method to the madness. There's a reason. I wasn't just calling it Fuck just to be reckless. There's this thing that I won't spoil in the film that would make sense once you see it.
And talk to me about the casting of this movie. Look, the man on your left is one of our great actors.
Absolutely.
But he doesn't get to hold too many movies. But this one he holds in his hands, and he's so powerful with it. Why did you go with him, and how did it come about?
I've been a fan of Jeffrey since I first saw him in Angels in America, the Mike Nichols adaptation for HBO, when I was a younger man. Then I saw him in Basquiat, and then I was just obsessed with him for that. Every time that I saw him in something, I was thrilled. And this is not a lie, just to please Jeffrey. I started reading the novel in his voice. That's how early I started thinking of Jeffrey for the role. When I got far enough into the material that I thought maybe I want to adapt this and maybe I want to direct this. Soon after that, I started thinking of Monk, the character in the book, as being Jeffrey Wright. So I got my hopes up real high, and I'm very happy he didn't say no, because I would have been devastated, because I've been thinking of him basically as soon as I started the project.
So my voice was in your head as well?
Yeah, it's like this. It still is.
My sympathies. I know what that's like.
So Jeffrey, where did you find the rhythm, man, to play Thelonious?
Where did I find
the rhythm to play Thelonious?
the rhythm? Well, I'm not. There are not a lot of roles that are written for me. I'm not like that kind of archetype for many stories within our culture, which is one of the reasons I think that my flexibility serves me. I like to kind of not retrace old steps when I do work. It just kind of keeps it exciting for me, and it's the actors that I admired early on were actors like that, folks like Dustin Hoffman and Peter Sellers, even guys who kind of shape-shifted. But with this role, the rhythms were mine. This is probably the most personal character that I've played, the character that's kind of most in line with, not entirely, but with many of my sensibilities, observations, circumstances. And I think the only other film that kind of approaches this in terms of that alignment was probably Basquiat, which I also felt a very kind of intimate understanding of, because I knew that life. It was, partly my life, and likewise with this story.
25, 30 years separate those two movies. So what was going on in between? I mean, it strikes me that maybe you were enduring and suffering some of the things that are discussed in this movie.
I don't think that the alignment for me is necessarily in those terms. Again, I've managed to kind of circumnavigate a lot of that stuff. I've done work that's deeply satisfying to me. I've done work that I've chosen to do. I've done work at times that was convenient for me because I'm also a father. And, I wanted to go off only for 2 weeks instead of for 6 months to work and come back home. So I've been, somehow reasonably clever navigating this madness, For me, what makes it deeply personal, and also what drew me to the character and to the story, was less so the social commentary and the satire and all of that stuff, which is wonderful and poignant and smart and sharply drawn and all of that. But I think the most touching thing for me, and I think also perhaps the most subversive thing about the film, is the portrait of family. Because that's the antithesis of all the tropes and stereotypes that we're commenting on. But that portrait is there to be seen, and we're living through that these are people too. These are, this is a man who's experiencing all of the pressures and burdens of all of a sudden having to be the adult in the middle of his family. And I reached that point in my life where I was that person too, having to become the caretaker for, those who were my caretaker. And at the same time, I'm like, Mom, being a father. So it was that story, and also the sacrifices that he was asked to make, or asked himself, or the fates asked him to make as a result of those responsibilities. Sacrifices, both personal and professional, all of that stuff. That's where my heart, found alignment. The headier stuff was just was a cherry on that Sunday. Yeah.
God, it was a great performance. Laura, talk to me about the score for this movie, because you're a jazz baby, aren't you?
I am, but I want to talk about the family theme actually, because you mentioned the family story being the most radical part of the film. I've always thought of it as that too, and the thing that I love about it is that it's always beautiful but never quite played together, so that there are no instruments that actually play at exactly the same time, but they're playing the same thing. And so to me that very much exemplifies so much of what Jeffrey said, where you've got these people who are kind of moving through space together, who love each other, but are not always on the same page. But yes, I grew up playing jazz and classical music. It was an obvious choice because the character's name is Monk, of course, after the great Thelonious Monk, who was really an incredibly brilliant composer, pianist, and really unique, like a one-of-a-kind guy. You hear one note of a recording, and instantly you know it's Monk because the style is so sort of specific.
What were the notes that Cord gave? How did you discuss putting the score together?
Well, I mean, we talked about a lot of things with Cord and Hilda. First we thought, well, do we do Monk? I mean, is that a possibility? But eventually I wrote a theme for Monk that was jagged, like the Monk music that we just talked about, that sort of performed like he would. And I played some of it, but I also had the great Patrice Rushen come in and play piano, and so that was really a pleasure.
Cool. And you did a theme for the family as well.
Yes. So, those are the two kind of major thematic thrusts throughout the movie, although there are other things. And I think one of the things that I related so much to what you said, Jeffrey, is I'm sort of musically gymnastic too, out of necessity. But I think the score required that, because you had to switch so quickly between comedy, like you just saw, and then this very, very touching family story about caretaking, all of them caretaking for each other.
And Hilda, to that end, talking about how to switch between high comedy and the sort of family dynamic, how did you sort of set that tone in the editing?
Well, that really was the biggest challenge in editing. I mean, we started with a great script, that was a great foundation, and an amazing cast, of course, but we knew the ingredients for something good were there, but we had to make it really special, and the biggest challenge was tone and rhythm. You know, on the surface, this movie is a satire. You just watched a very satirical scene, but underneath it, there is this major family drama. It's also a romance. It's also an artist's journey, a writer finding himself in his voice, and the struggles of that. So it's many movies in one, and that was a real challenge, was how to navigate switching tones, and not just switching, but really melding, creating a perfect mix of tones. We wanted the movie to kind of flow like life. You know, life is not one genre. Weird, funny things happen, absurd things happen right next to something really tragic, and this movie finds that kind of rhythm. But that was the biggest challenge. But part of nailing that tone was also a rhythmic thing. We actually ended up cutting quite a few scenes out of the movie. We worked on it for quite a while. We've had our discussions with Jeffrey, I'll just say. But we needed, look, they were great scenes. They were funny scenes, they were beautifully shot scenes, like the one by the pool.
They dropped music of mine too, so don't worry.
They were wonderful, wonderful scenes. They were written well. They were wonderful. But, you know, individual scenes, even if they're working, the movie has to work, right? And so we had to kill some darlings. I mean, that was one of the things that was so amazing about working with Cord as a first-time director that is really, really unique, is that Cord was willing to be really open and really disciplined at the same time about killing his darlings and making the sacrifices we needed to make to get the right rhythm to nail the tone.
And Christina, you're the visual flair. Talk to me about how you work with Cord and your collaborators on shooting the film.
Well, I think, you know, being the director and the writer, so much of the visual language he put into the script, whether he realized it or not in the beginning. So it was about translating that together and coming up with a language. And everybody talks about the rhythm of the film, which was so hard to navigate, honestly, because it is all of those things. It's a comedy, it's a satire, it's a, you know, beautiful family drama, and then there's also elements of action. And so keeping that rhythm with the camera was very important to us. It's often moving and flowing through characters, which is why we decided to shoot in the 2:3:5 anamorphic aspect ratio. There's an incredible ensemble cast, and we wanted to be able to hold a lot of them in the frame at the same time and weave our way through them. And then sometimes the camera will pan off to something that's happening over here to reveal things. And I think, you know, our initial discussions were in the first scene, especially showing Monk's isolation and who he is and not letting anyone. So it's just, it opens on this single frame of him alone, and then we sort of pan over to reveal this chaos that's always happening around him. And that was how we approached the film.
And for you, Cord, I mean, sort of, sure, it's a movie based on a novel, but it also has deeply personal elements in it as well. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I read this book resonated with me deeper than any piece of art had before or since. You know, it's not just the satirical stuff that I'm talking about people telling me that I need to blacken up the script, right? Like, that happens, yes, I get it. By the way, every time that I've gotten that note, I always say, I will indulge that note if you come to me and tell me what it means to be blacker. And then nobody does. They're always way too afraid to actually try to have that conversation with me. But sort of even beyond that, as they said, you know, I wanted this movie to feel like life. I didn't want it to, you know, life doesn't take time, you know. You have a family member die, and then you have a work problem, and then you've got a personal issue problem. Like, all of this stuff sort of comes at once, and that's sort of the way that the world is. And so I really wanted this to feel like it was real life. And so, you know, I have 2 siblings, the way the monk has 2 siblings. I had an ailing mother at one point. I have and still have an overbearing father figure who I love very much, but he looms large in my life, and he will when he's gone too. There was all these elements that I just it started to feel like some of the storylines in the book and the storyline of my life, the Venn diagram of those things were a circle. It just felt, there's not just sort of real things that happened with me and my mother and me and my siblings, but down to there's a list of fake book titles at one point in the film, and all of those book titles are the names of my friends' bands from high school. So if you see Car Full of Bosnians in the movie, Car Full of Bosnians was a bunch of my Bosnian friends in high school who had this weird punk band. So there's just from the sort of like bigger things down to the smallest details. There's just a lot of me in there, and I feel like I surrounded myself. One of the things that from Jeffrey, everybody here on stage, that I said to everybody was that, look, I've never done this before, and so there's going to be some things that I don't know, and you need to help me sometimes and teach me as we go. And I said I'm smart, I'm a quick learner, but there's going to be things that I just don't know off the bat. And if you don't want to do your job, because your jobs are hard enough, if you don't want to do your job, acting or being a cinematographer, being an editor, composer, if you don't want to do that and sometimes serve as a substitute teacher to help me learn, I don't begrudge you walking away from this job and saying, I don't want to do that. This is not for me. And so I just felt entirely protected, and sort of so that's what I think gave me the courage to go into work every day and not feel like I'm out of my depth and I'm going to screw something up, is I really felt like I surrounded myself with people who were not only eminently capable and good at their jobs, but also were willing to sort of like go on this journey with me, this very personal journey with me, and sort of protect me. And I feel, I don't believe in the auteur shit. Like this is it is sort of like it takes a village. And so I love all these people here to my left, and I'm so grateful that they were willing to make this movie with me.
Well, you had great teachers. You took us on a great journey, and it's a great movie.
Thank you so much.
American Fiction, ladies and gentlemen.